Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name's Steve and this is a 5-minute review of Ready Player One from 2018. The film has recently come on to Netflix, and with the arrival of Ready Player 2, the new novel by Ernest Cline, I thought I'd rewatch this film again and do a short review on it. Now, I did read the original book, Ready Player One, back in the day, and I really enjoyed it. I'm someone who's from that era, who was around in the 80s and 90s. I played the video games, I get a lot of the cultural references, and the book is really cool. It's an interesting kind of journey with an Easter egg hunt, and it's all to do with this wonderful place called the OASIS. It's the ultimate version of the internet combined with VR. From a movie perspective, you can see why Spielberg was attracted to this, because the main character, Wade Watts, is a combination of somewhere between Harry Potter and Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He's someone who lives with an unpleasant aunt and her nasty boyfriend. He sleeps not under the stairs, but on a washer and dryer. And he lives in the middle of Ohio, which has become a bit of a mess. The whole world has essentially become that way. People have stopped caring about it. And as a result, they spend all of their time on the Oasis. People earn their living there. And something that they skipped over in the film, which is touched on more in the books, is that children are educated through that way, and they have teachers from wherever, and they can do all sorts of cool things. Like, instead of talking about the pyramids, you can go to the Oasis, the equivalent of the pyramids in Giza, and wander around and look at things and smell and touch and taste and so on, and all that kind of thing. So that's really cool. The film side has taken all of that and kind of got rid of it and made it more about the fact that everyone lives in this awful place. However, the Oasis is wonderful. Let's all go and spend time in there. And the creator of the Oasis has created this ultimate Easter egg hunt, saying if you find the 3 keys, you win the prize, which is you then own the Oasis and all of my shares. Now, in the book and in the film, Wade isn't a very nice character. He's a bit of an arsehole. He doesn't really care about helping other people. He's doing it because he wants to get riches, he wants to get women, he wants to live a wonderful life, and he doesn't really care about other people. He has some care for his aunt, but there again, she's not a particularly nice character, so you don't really care about her fate. And it's only through meeting other characters, his new friends in the Oasis and his old friends, that he starts to grow and become a better person. But to begin with, he's just not very likeable. They had to change some of the challenges from the book to make them more visually interesting for the film, and I accept that. That was bound to happen. But in doing so, they seem to have dumbed them down. They didn't do anything particularly clever or really interesting, which is a shame given the level of CGI and the special effects in this film. There's lots of cool Easter eggs, lots of interesting characters in the background, whether it's the Master Chief from the Halo games or Beetlejuice or somebody else. Because it comes under the Warner Brothers banner, they're able to sneak all of these things in. So that was nice, but they didn't lean into some of the stuff from the books. Maybe it was a rights issue, but there again, I think they could have got around it by creating more interesting challenges. But they didn't do that, they dumbed it down. The film also completely avoids the actual issue of the film, which is the real world isn't a terrible place, but as long as you're having a good time in the Oasis, that's all that matters. It doesn't really touch on that at all. There's a little bit of stuff to do with that with the rebellion, and the fact that one of the other characters, it's not even Wade, lives in pretty poor conditions, and they're trying to gain control of the Oasis and win it over from this corporate place that wants to flood it with advertising and start charging people and all this kind of stuff. From a storytelling perspective, they've dumbed it down to make it more appealing to a wider audience, make it a fun adventure film, which is fine. And if you view it just from that perspective, then it's pretty good. It's quite entertaining, but don't look too much and don't try and scrape beneath the surface, because you can see there are a lot of problems with it. Another problem with the film is that it doesn't really tap into the era from which the character and the main creator came from. It's all to do with love of the 80s and the 90s. And there are a few moments throughout the film where they talk about this character, the creator, talk about his love of these things, but we don't really see them. We see a bad version of The Shining, and that is something that's highlighted as something that the creator, Stephen King, didn't like, the Kubrick version. And there's a great scene where they go into a replica of the Kubrick version of the film in the Oasis and explore it and do part of the quest in there. And that's good, but that's not really a great example of the love of that decade or decade and a half that they talk about so much in the book. So that's really missing from the film. Because Waithe is quite an unlikable character, it's hard to relate to him. Most of the film takes place in the Oasis, so it's this weird wonderland that you can't really connect to. Anybody can be whoever they want to be, they can look however they want to, so you don't really know who anybody is in the real world. And there's a little bit of that with a couple of the main characters, but there again, they don't spend too much time on that aspect of the anonymity of the internet, how it can allow you to say and do whatever you want to do, and there's some of that in the book, very little of that in the film. There again, they've smoothed off some of the more harsh and difficult edges of the idea of the Oasis being a real thing. I think watching this the second time, I enjoyed it a little less. Mostly because I was no longer just being overwhelmed with the spectacle of this film, because there is a lot to take in, and on a second and third viewing you can spot all the cool things, like using the Iron Giant or Chucky or mention of the Rubik's Cube. And for a newer generation, those who aren't of a similar age to me, I think they're not going to get most of the references because they're just not old enough. So for them, it's going to be this roller coaster of an action film. For those who are a bit older, we'll get some of the cultural touchstones and some of the cool references, but I think some of the heart of the story has been lost from translating it from book to film. And this is usually the case, but with something like this, I'm just a little bit disappointed, more so than I would have been, because I'm of the era that the film it talks about so much and the love of the 80s. The idea of a creator putting their name in a video game sounds quite tame today, and it happens all the time, have their own characters in there. But back in the day, this was something really, really special, and it had never been done before. So when they highlight it in the film, it's an interesting moment, but most people just go, so what? The film does suffer a lot of spectacle over substance. We get very little character development on any of the main characters. We don't know much about them apart from Waithe, and as I mentioned, he's not particularly likeable and he doesn't really change because of something he's learned. He changes because what other people tell him to do. He doesn't learn through experience because there isn't time, because the film is action all the way through. Overall, I enjoyed watching Ready Player One, but I don't think I'll go back and watch it again for some time. Perhaps when I've forgotten some of the story, or I want a bit of nostalgia from the 80s. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Ready Player One 3 out of 5 and say, if you've never seen it, it's definitely worth seeing. If you've already seen it once, maybe give it a couple of years and then go back and watch it again. So, have you seen Ready Player One? Have you read the book? Have you read the new book, Ready Player Two? If so, get in touch and let us know. You can contact us in all of the usual ways. We're on email, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. If you like what we do, you can support us on Ko-fi. We have new episodes coming out every week with either myself or my co-host. And thanks for listening.